Good morning, young students. We are excited to host the Professionals by Pathway Careers Exploration event to help students connect their learning to career opportunities. I am Janessa Sutton, and I'm excited to welcome Jamie Jones with Starbucks as our guest today. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that this is being recorded, so future students can benefit from our speakers. We have the next 30 minutes to learn about this career field, the education that is needed to grow and enter within the industry, and what advice our speaker has for our students. We will be monitoring any questions that students submit. Let's get started so our students can learn about the various professions and how we can prepare for our future. Jamie, tell us about your career field and how you'd like to get started, growth opportunities, pay, and more.
Cool. Thank you. So nice to be here. I work for Starbucks now, but I'm gonna go through a little presentation and just show you guys kind of where I started and my college experience a little bit, and then where I am now. Let me just share my screen. Can you see that? Okay. Cool. So about me, I'm currently a senior designer in the Starbucks Creative Studio. I'm 26 years old. I graduated from Young High School in 2012 and from Western Washington University in 2015 with my BFA in graphic design. I'm currently living in Seattle and working from home. I typically, before the pandemic, worked in office 9 to 5, but since then have worked from home full 40 hours a week. And I have a 10-year-old Persian cat named Tofu. Here he is. Isn't he cute? So why did I choose design? I did yearbook class in high school for all 3 years and kind of fell in love with layout design through that. I've always loved art. I thought I would probably work for like a magazine or something like that when I was doing yearbook because I had no idea just the full breadth of options there were within the design world until I went to college. And I was really bad at science, so my dreams of being a doctor were squashed. Um, so my Western Washington University experience through the design program was amazing. It's a 2-year program at the start where they kind of make you go through the gamut of like every single type of design. So we learned about typography, layout, printing processes, app design, web design, illustration, 3D design, packaging, art and design history, everything. And then I decided to do the additional 1 year to get my BFA, which is basically like a smaller group of students you have to apply with your portfolio from your first 2 years to get into it. Every school is different though. And that was kind of a more like long form, like team project oriented class where we did kind of more like real life type projects and kind of focused in on the type of work that we wanted to do and show in our portfolio, and we did a summer internship as well. This page kind of shows like my portfolio, glance at my portfolio at the end of my college career. So yeah, lots of stuff. We did a lot of branding, type. We had to create like full 3D packaging, lots of websites and apps. And then I got my first big girl job out of college as a junior designer at a place called Electric Pen, which was a really, really small little firm in Seattle. I think there was like 10 or 12 people total in the time that I was there, including people who weren't designers. And at that job, I did a lot of kind of brand stuff for like local companies in Seattle, presentation design, web design. It was kind of on the more boring side, but that's kind of just how it is when you first start. And I basically made no money at that job. I got paid, but I basically made no money. And here's kind of a glance at the stuff I did there. I worked on some like wine labels. That was like the most fun thing I did there. And then I did some brand stuff for the company itself. We rebranded them and did some other branding for, they did a lot of stuff for like really techie companies in Seattle. And that was kind of, I learned a lot in that job, but I kind of realized that I wanted to do something a little bit more creative coming out of that. And so I applied for the Starbucks Creative Studio out of there. And at the Creative Studio, I've done so many things. When I first applied there, I started working on the social media team for the Starbucks Reserve brand, which is kind of like the little sister brand of Starbucks, that has the like fancy Reserve stores and roasteries. And then maybe like a year and a half in, we had a big reorg and switched how everything worked. And I started working on everything for the big Starbucks. And I do everything from seasonal campaigns, coffee packaging, film, illustration and animation, and still social stuff as well. So here's my office from the outside. It's normally gray because it's in Seattle, but this is a nice sunny day. This is in Soto. You can see it from the freeway sometimes, the Starbucks lady on top. Here's kind of when you walk in, the lobby area. They just revamped a bunch of it. It's a really old building, so it's kind of like they've been slowly remodeling, and some of the building is really cool and fresh and new, and some of it just looks like 1980s carpet and cubicles. So I'll show you the cool parts. And here's some interior. On the right, there's some images of the creative studio. We put up art everywhere to try and stay inspired. Lots of plants too. I didn't have a photo of my desk, and it's nothing special, but because it really is just like desks in a row, kind of cubicle-y style, but we try and freshen it up. We have a million plants in the studio. Hopefully they're not all dead now because of the pandemic. Okay, so my first job at Starbucks working on the Reserve social team, I just like didn't even realize how much design work and work in general goes into social media for a big brand, and especially now, like it's crazy. So this was a really like fun and kind of experimental design job where we got to kind of explore what this brand was going to look like because it was so new. And here's like a sampling of stuff that I made on the right. I did a lot of animation, illustration. We did some photo shoots, lots of photo shoots actually. And I'm gonna just kind of go into like a little bit of this process just to show you guys how crazy it is just for like one design or one social media post. But so we did these things, we called them tapestries, where we would make like 6 or 9 posts for one kind of launch. So it could be either like a new coffee was launching or a roastery was opening or something like that we wanted to put out on social media for like a week. And we would build out a full mood board for these 6 posts. So this was for a specific coffee, whiskey barrel aged coffee. So we made this mood board, we did color palette, and then on the right, we had this full concept feed with like fake posts. And this is all just to get this bought off by my creative directors and my leadership. And then from there, we get that approved, and then we could actually do the real photo shoots. So this was like our final products for those. Fun. And that job was super scrappy, which I think is true for a lot of things. People kind of imagine like big brand, you probably have like a huge studio, lots of money, whatever. And sometimes that's true for big Starbucks, but for this stuff, it was pretty low budget. We like would go to Home Depot, buy a piece of glass, make some ice letters and melt it with a hair dryer and record it. And like, it was really, really scrappy. We did it in like the basement of the SSC, which is the Starbucks Support Center, that headquarters, and in what we called the cage, which had like just a bunch of junk, like tons of old merch samples and like weird stuff like that. And we would just kind of like do our own thing. It was really, really fun. Okay, so now getting into big ass Starbucks work. Here's kind of just a sampling of the type of stuff that I've done over the last couple of years. I think something that I really love about my job at Starbucks specifically is just like the breadth of work that I get to do. I'm not really, I wouldn't call myself like a specialist as far as design goes. Some people are really focused in on illustration. Some people are really focused in on web or user experience or user interface design. And that's totally fine. That's actually probably more normal. But I never could really like decide. And so I loved that at Starbucks, I could kind of do a little bit of everything. And we do a lot of illustration stuff, but so I've worked on packaging, This Partial to Peppermint thing is a magazine ad, so print work. The top left, these little cards are coffee cards for the Reserve store, so like branding for like individual coffees. Gift cards is a huge business. If you're really into illustration, the bottom left, I animated a full 15-second ad. That was like crazy. Yeah, so that's kind of broad. And then here's a mural that we painted in the SSC, which is like right in front of where the creative studio space is. It's actually really sad because we finished it like 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, and then we couldn't see it anymore. But that was kind of an amazing experience. And then for film, which is something that I've gotten really, really into in the last year or so, we started making commercials through the creative studio as well. So this is kind of a process page of this. On the right, I made this mood board to sell in our concept. We work with writers and creative directors as well. So it's a full team working on this stuff. And then we'll sell in these concepts to our marketing team because they're the ones who are like paying for it. They're like the ones who have to buy off on this stuff, and the business team. So this was my mood board on the right, and then I drew these storyboards on the top left. And then once we got all that approved, we did a ton of other kind of like detailed stuff, like picking out wardrobe, picking out lighting, like figuring out location, all this stuff. And then we worked with an agency to help us kind of like bring it to life. And let's see if it'll play the final product. Yeah, so that's another thing I do. I've done a few, maybe like 3 or 4 commercials now through Starbucks. Here are some behind the scenes stuff from that. Definitely one of the coolest projects I've worked on. Got to go to LA to help like creative direct this, and it was amazing. And then seasonal campaigns are also a huge job that I work on through Starbucks. So this is the holiday. I'm sure you recognize some of this stuff. The holiday campaign from this last year, which I was working on like basically all of last year. We started on this in September of 2019, and then it launched a year and a half later. So the team that's working on this holiday is already like designed the cups and everything is already done. But so basically our team will start kind of creating some mood boards, working on some styles. We go through like a million renditions and create a style guide for the whole season because so many people touch this work in other countries and the whole studio. And so a lot of the work that I actually do is like making guides for other designers to make things. So this was kind of like our overall look and feel for the whole campaign. And then once we had that and the style guide, we kind of broke out into smaller groups, and me and one other designer did the cups for this year, which you've probably seen is probably one of the biggest things I've done in my career so far. And yeah, I went through that really fast. So if you have any questions, I feel like I zipped through that.
I know you mentioned towards the beginning of your presentation that your book kind of helped you. Were there any other classes that you took in high school that sort of led you into wanting to be to do the work that you do now?
I'm not sure about high school. Yearbook was definitely like the big catalyst for this. I honestly really wanted to be a doctor for like my whole life growing up. And then probably in like 9th or 10th grade, I just realized that science was like not my thing. And so maybe science was actually, but I liked it, but I just like yearbook, I became really passionate about it. I ended up being the design editor for the last couple of years that I was there. And Yeah, I took some art classes too at the community college because I did run and start my last year or my last couple of years of high school. So those were also kind of big in that, but definitely mostly yearbook. I like got kind of obsessed with it, and yeah, and I really didn't even understand until I went to college just how much more there was than like that type of design. Um, yeah, sorry, I don't know if I really answered that, but
Okay. Um, and what do you love most about your work?
I think I love like the concept stages, and I love that the fact that I get to like create things for a living is like amazing. I It's a lot of work, and I feel like I at the beginning kind of thought like, oh, it's going to be like all fun and games. It's definitely like there's a lot of tedious stuff, but at the end of the day, like being able to work with a team and come up with these ideas and then see them kind of like fully come to realization in real life, and like seeing like, oh, this cup in the world, or oh, this, even just like a social media post or something that you worked on, like it's a pretty magical feeling. It's very satisfying. And I also love my job specifically at Starbucks. It's just a group of really good people, and I think that being in the creative field, you'll just find that there's a lot of people like rooting for you and like wanting you to like be express yourself, and like that's just something that I really love about my job.
That's great. Do you have any advice to give students who are looking to go into the same career field as you?
Yeah, I would say so. First of all, just like start paying attention. Like if you're really interested in design, like start paying attention to it in the real world. It's everywhere, and like as soon as you kind of, it's one of those things that like if you're not paying attention to it, you don't really notice it. But once you start paying attention to it, you notice it literally everywhere. And so, just start observing art and design. If you see something you think is cool, like try and figure out who made it, because it's like if you see an advertisement on TV and you're like, oh, who made that? Like it's probably in someone's portfolio somewhere, some agency, and then you can see what else they made and look at their work. Because really, like observing art and design is like a huge step towards like gaining that knowledge and that eye that you need. Um, and then follow designers and artists on social media, and just start making stuff, because you don't have to have like the programs, like the fancy programs and all that stuff to start making stuff. Like there's a ton of free apps and stuff out there now that you can use, or just start drawing. Really just start like using that visual muscle. Because when I first started, like I still say that I don't think that I'm like the best illustrator, but I have worked that muscle now. And like when I first started, I thought I was just gonna do layout, like just like organize photos, because I was like, I can't draw. But yeah, you just gotta work that muscle. And also like look towards books and documentaries. There's tons of documentaries. There's like abstract on Netflix, and lots, if you just look up design documentaries, there'll probably be a ton that you can look at. I watch music videos all the time for inspiration. Um, yeah, just get yourself like immersed in it. And I heard that there's going to be a design class in the high school, so definitely get involved in that.
Um, do you know what your next step is for you in the design industry?
Um, well, I recently got promoted to senior designer, so I'm like not necessarily looking at what the next step is right away, but I think in the future, my dream would be to be a creative director, or to potentially, probably not for Starbucks though, because I just probably see myself kind of going in my own direction. I love Starbucks, but I feel like eventually I'll probably want to like take it onto either working for a big agency that does like film, or potentially working for myself and doing freelance. I do some freelance now, but working a 40-hour work week is like, that's a lot, especially right now with working from home and everything. But yeah, definitely see myself as a creative director in the next like 5 to 10 years for sure. blinded right now.
I have a question, if you don't mind, Janessa.
Sure.
So, Jamie, what kind of technology did you have to learn in order to do all the different parts of your job?
Yeah, so the Adobe programs are pretty standard for designers. So in Yearbook, I learned InDesign and a little bit of Illustrator and Photoshop. And those are like the kind of baseline. And I think you can get like, I mean, you guys probably have them on some of your computers at school. So definitely utilize that while you can, while it's free. But also, I know they have a lot of student discounts and stuff like that as well. And then there's a lot of other programs for different types of design. Like for animation, I've learned After Effects, which is also an Adobe program, and Premiere, which is for like cutting together movies. And then I also do a lot of illustration on my iPad in a program called Procreate, which I highly recommend to anyone who is exploring like drawing illustration work. It's relatively cheap. I mean, you have to get the iPad, I guess, but you can get an old gen iPad and you can still get them on there. But yeah, that totally changed the game for me for illustration. Yeah, and then I think there's a lot of other programs that I don't even know for like UX design. So I would say that I'm more of a visual designer, kind of like straight up like visual graphic design. And then there's kind of another world on the other side that's more user experience, user interface, and that's honestly where the big money is. But um, that's like a whole nother world of programs that I think you can do some of that stuff in like Photoshop, but there's also a lot of other programs for that type of work as well.
Would you say it was kind of a mix between learning those in college and on the job, or more on the job?
College was hugely. Yeah, they didn't really like teach us the technology as much as they were just kind of like, go do this thing, use this, and they kind of made us figure it out on our own. So, and there's so much on the internet, on YouTube, like so many things for learning those programs now. But yeah, and I learned Procreate later, so that was only like a couple years ago now that I started using that. But most of that I learned in college. Definitely like refined it though a ton after on the job.
And
went from here to like here.
And I think sometimes students don't necessarily recognize, because obviously they haven't been there yet, that that's what happens a lot. So would you say, you said earlier, oh my gosh, I just had a great question and I totally lost it. Oh, in one of your slides, you mentioned that you did an internship. I think you did. And will you explain how valuable that was, especially for someone in your career field, or how important it is in college?
Yeah, it's incredibly valuable. I was very, very lucky that my school really like pushed the internship, and they had the professors had a ton of connections and like really like got the internships for us. We still had to go and apply for them and everything, and like do an interview and all that stuff, but they got all of us internships. And I would say like a lot of the work that I did in the internship wasn't like super exciting or anything like that, but it was like hugely valuable to just like work directly with a creative director and like work in an office and like do that 9 to 5 kind of feeling and like understand the process of how something starts to end and like all that. Like in college, you're kind of just like doing your own thing a lot, which is great. And like, I highly recommend doing that, but the internship was just like so valuable for learning those kind of like day-to-day professional life skills.
Was that like over the summer or for a semester or?
Yeah, it was over the summer. So we applied for the BFA at the end of like my junior year, basically. And then we started the BFA like at the very end of that year once we were accepted. And then we did the internship the summer before my senior year. And I did it through this brand called Superfeet. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. They're like they do insoles. It's not super sexy, but it's they have really nice packaging, and I got to like work on that, and yeah. very valuable.
Janessa, do you have any last questions? We need to wrap it up in just a few minutes.
Nope, I think I'm good.
Yeah, Jamie, you answered a lot of our questions, I think, through the course of your presentation.
Awesome.
So were there any, I guess I do have one more question. Were there any other schools, colleges that you looked at that you would, if students are considering graphic design, so apply to Western, right? Go Vikings, but where else could they look?
Yeah, I definitely highly recommend Western. They're one of the, like, around Seattle area. They're really well known for having a really good and like intense program. Like, it's no joke. But UW is also really good. I have a lot of friends that graduated from UW that went on to do, like, that I work with now. And then school, what is it called? There's a few like design specific schools in Seattle as well. I didn't.
And I know what you're talking about, and I'm completely spacing on it.
Well, there's like SVC, which is School of Visual Concepts, and they're more like, if you don't see yourself doing like a 3 or 4 year college program, there's also a lot of other options. Like, there's like General Assembly and SVC and like a lot of other like art specific schools where you could take like just specific classes that you want to take too, or you could just go take a class and see if you're interested in design through something like that as well before like applying for like a bigger program.
Oh, I think that's great advice. Oh, thank you for that, because that's something I had, no idea was available. Janessa, do you want to? Oh, wait, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say a lot of people who are graduated too will go and like take classes to like refresh stuff, because they'll have really specific like tactical classes, like, oh, we're gonna learn how to like code a website in this class or something like that. That like if you haven't done it in a while, you might need that refresh. But it would be a really good start.
That's awesome. Janessa, do you want to wrap us up?
Sure. So we just wanted to say thank you, Jamie, for taking the time to share your career and advice with us today. I hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you so much.